The Sockjig Sneaker Podcast is more useful than a communications degree. Welcome to episode 74 of the Sockjig Sneaker Podcast. You can follow me on Twitter at Sockjig and on Instagram as well. So a lot of topics in this episode. Up front, I talk about some nice feedback I got on the last episode and clarify some things when it comes to Twitter beefs. So if you like Twitter drama, that's the segment for you. I also talk about some news from the past month. I give some thoughts about StockX sneakers being at Walmart and why that's happening. I talk about TwoJsKicks being apparently out at Urban Necessities, and I guess that's a story I broke widely, even though some people did know about it. I also talk about more customizers being accused of selling fakes, and I talk about Tom Sachs being back at Nike, and the more main segment topics, I talk about James Whitner giving up his claim to $1.2 million in seized money and his announcement that the feds are not charging him because they don't have admissible evidence. I also talk about his appearance on a Complex YouTube show and the PR show that it was, and then I talk about the news that broke that he's potentially going to Adidas. So I go into speculation mode a little bit and I talk about the relationship between James Whitner and Nike and Jordan Brand and with Adidas, and if all that will work together or is it going to be separate. Finally, I talk about the Nike CEO John Donahoe stepping down and the new CEO and who's really to blame for these last 4 or 5 years of Nike's decline. So the episode got a little bit long. Some topics I discussed, I had to think carefully about how I was going to talk about it. And, if I had more time, I would have made a shorter podcast. But first, on feet, pickups, and skips. On feet, I've been wearing the Pata Air Max 1 Chlorophyll. I got these in size 12.5, and really in the new Air Max build, you don't really need to go half size up like you generally had to do on the previous old cut. So a size 12 would have worked out, but I always just go for a 12.5. It's like an instinct when it comes to Air Max 1. For pickups, I was able to pick up the Verdi SB. Shout out to Premier Raffle for that one. I made jokes about this shoe, and it doesn't mean I don't like the shoe. It's just for the sake of a joke most of the time. And so in hand, the fur is a little wild, but the actual colors are like really good. So the marketing for the shoe was probably a little bit better than the shoe itself. There's good promo videos. And like I've always said, sneakerheads love being marketed to. Give me a video package, a poster, a half a story, anything. And so the Verdi guy, he knows that well, and he knows that he could do that and people will love it. So sometimes Nike will give you all that, and other times they'll just post some ChatGPT written copy on the sneakers app, and that's it. Also picked up the Travis Jordan 1 Olive. I got that from the Travis Scott site. So shout out to Travis Scott, Team Travis. Like I always said, friend of the show, Travis Scott is a huge fan of the Sockjig Sneaker Podcast. So you should listen as well too. I don't know why I'm telling you to listen. You're already listening. So these were available early on a lot of these resale sites for like $5.50. GOAT always had them early. Even the Network app had them early for $4.99. And I joked about it, how Complex's parent company is apparently a resale shop that sells early backdoored pairs now. So maybe their professional sneaker journalists will write a story detailing exactly how the Network app was able to get these pairs early and how they were able to price them at $4.99. So people always want to know, how do people know that this is what the price will settle at? Like, do they know what the wider stock numbers are? If something is limited and hyped up, so should that be $1,000 or $800 or $4.99? So Complex, maybe you guys can ask your parent company how it worked. How did this all happen? How were you able to get these early pairs on your site? Of course, that's not happening, but maybe in the future, if you ever have to talk about early pairs or backdoor pairs, you can add a little disclaimer or disclosure that your parent company sells early or backdoor pairs. But back to the shoe itself, I'm glad more people were able to hit on this one. It seemed like there was more winners on the Travis Scott raffle site. And, there was wider stock, which is kind of indicated by the resale price being in the 400s instead of the 800 or thousands, as I mentioned. So solid shoe. That reverse mocha low colorway is a solid color with the more white panels, and this one kind of has that. So excited to get it in hand. I also picked up the undefeated Humara Light Menta. That's that bright green one that looks like toothpaste. And that was one of my very few reach packs that I've done in the last little while. And I just noticed on the Goat app that they had a size run of them for $172, which I guess is $2 over retail. So it's the first shoe I've paid resale for in a long time by over $2. For skips, as I talked about last time, I skipped the Alma Manier Jordan 4, the Sammy Sosa 4, and even before the drop, it looked like that they had a lot of pairs just by the marketing and how they announced the drop. They just said it's going to drop online. They're going to skip doing all the raffles and everything like that. So that usually tells you, we have enough pairs. We think the demand might be a little bit lower, so just put them all online. Why go through all the motions of doing raffles and all the rounds like I talked about before? That's a lot of work to do. I also saw that they dropped on Foot Locker, which I've never seen a collab sneaker drop on Foot Locker. Maybe that was leftovers. Maybe they had too much stock and they know they could send it to Foot Locker. Maybe that's Nike now sucking up to Foot Locker because of how things have gone with their relationship in the past, which I'll talk about when I talk about the Nike CEO being out. But all this high stock and kind of, lower demand, the high stock was decided a long time ago, and it's way too late to change anything about that now. But even all things James Whitner, I'll talk about in the whole James Whitner section as well too. I also skipped out on the Nigo Air Force 3, and I'm no historian or anything, but Nigo basically set the blueprint for what is drop culture, for what is streetwear, for sneaker culture, a lot of aspects of it. So he did this 20 plus years ago at Bape, and his formula was a mix of making things regional, making it limited, using different materials like patent leather and things like that, putting a twist on certain things and making it hype and creating energy, as they call it now, instead of hype. And Nike basically copied that formula from Nigo and Bape and then perfected it and then used it to launch into where we are now. So as much as Bapesta copied the Nike Air Force 1, Nike copied the hype formula from Nigo. So that is the very short version history of Nigo. And so it really is a monumental collab that Nigo and Nike are finally working together. And, he's a legend and deserves a spotlight if that's what he wants right now. And as I said about marketing and videos, all that stuff has been really good too. The anime video was good. The sneakerheads love that shit. They'll eat it up. So the shoe itself, not so much. It's not for me. An Air Force 1 would have been the easy layup, I think, but they probably didn't want to do the layup. But sometimes the layup is what you should just go for instead of this. So it's an Air Force 3, but it's still sort of referencing the Air Force 1 since it's recreating the patent Bapestas of 20 years ago, which were a takeoff of the Air Force 1. So ultimately, all that doesn't really matter. It really is just Nike flexing that they got Nigo at all. Hey, we sued Bape and we won that lawsuit and we got your boy working for us. The only guy that ever mattered. He's working on our timelines now. And ultimately how this shoe does kind of depends on the stock number. And it seems like they hit that right point. Like if it was up to me, I would have probably made like less than 2,000 and just made it ultra limited. But it seemed like it was probably a little bit higher than that, just judging by the resale prices. It's the type of shoe where if it's sold out, it looks much better than if it was sitting. If it was sitting, you're like, look at that piece of shit. But if it's sold out everywhere, it's like, wow, people wanted that piece of shit. It must be good. But like telling the story of Nigo and Nike and all that stuff that I talked about, the history and stuff, I really am curious to see if this is just for old heads or if 20-year-olds will care. Will they care about the guy that basically invented drop culture the year they were born? Even if Nike's not directly promoting as such, if they're, instead promoting some Japanese show that he watched as a kid or whatever. But that's up to them, and that's up to what Nigo feels like doing. I also skipped out on this Division Street Nike Dunk Goat app Flight Club exclusive shoe. And this whole thing, in case you don't know, is all name, image, likeness related. NIL program is what it is. Because originally the players at Oregon would get these PEs and they would sell it through reseller back channels before this NIL program came into place. And they didn't want the players to do that anymore. And now they have like an official way of doing this stuff. And that's what this Division Street stuff does. It lets them kind of, sell all the sneakers through this program. And Nike gives them all the shoes. And then they partner with Flight Club or Goat app as the exclusive resale partners for that shoe. And that's why the shoe is not like a retail price of $120. That's $275 or more. And so Flight Club in New York City had a big drop on it and a lot of people showed up. And that's because the previous version of the shoe, the Air Max 1, It was actually probably one of the bigger first come first serve scores in New York City in a long time, and the people who were there cleaned up really well, and they sold wristbands and things like that. And so, of course, the second time around, people are going to hear that people scored on the first one, and so a lot more people are going to come out. So that's why we saw people were selling like boof wristbands. I saw that's just hilarious, such a New York City thing to do, to sell fake wristband. You know how diabolical you have to be to, one, go to Michael's or some craft store and get these wristbands and even get a silver Sharpie. Like, I got a black Sharpie. I don't think I have one of those silver tip Sharpies anywhere here, but that's New York City. So the other thing that was hilarious about this whole thing is that people wanted a raffle. Like, why are you doing this in the street? This should be a raffle. And it's like, you're asking a consignment shop, a resale shop, to do a fair release, to do a raffle. The place that sells Jordan 1s for $1,000 when they go for $300, we want you to be a little bit more fair. Could you guys do that for us? Be a little bit more fair? And so, I guess they did do a raffle because it got shut down by NYPD. But even that, it's like, these people don't know how to do a raffle. They should use EQL and have a fair raffle. And it's like, this place does not care about fairness. They can pick the winners however they want. Maybe they'll do a random number generator. Maybe they'll just do friends. Maybe it'll just go out the back door. I don't know. People are just expecting a little bit too much from this release. From Flight Club, from Nike, from Division Street. Nike is suing StockX right now about partnering with GOAT. Like, one is evil and one is our partner. And they're only doing that because they can sell the shoes for $275 with Flight Club and GOAT. So the whole thing is a circus already, and the shoe, if you like it, you can partake in the circus. Otherwise, skip. First off, I want to say thank you for all the nice feedback I got on the last episode about EQL segment, especially. I got a lot of nice words publicly and privately from people in tech, people in the sneaker industry, and people who aren't chronically online and don't spend all their day on Twitter, who didn't know anything about it. And so they were thankful to hear about it and my take on it. And so thank you for taking the time to listen to it. I know it was a long segment and I had a lot to say about it. But after that episode came out, in case you saw this on Twitter, Sneaker Fetish Kari may have been a little upset with me with a word I used when I was talking about myself and my own credibility. I basically said, I know what I'm talking about. I'm not biased when it comes to this kind of stuff. I'm not glazing for brand deals or trying to get free sneakers. And that word glazing will do it. I could have just said I'm not going for brand deals, but I remember at the time, when I'm recording, I'm just eyes closed and I'm talking. And listening back when I was editing it, I was like, I should probably remove that word or re-record that whole line. And I didn't. I left it in there. I was talking about myself, of course, but of course it could be considered a stray if you're Kari listening to that I used the word glazing. But really, I left it in there because he was subtweeting about EQL haters and grouping me in with Davon and other people that he does not like, and me as collateral damage. And all those shots were at his nemesis, Davon, but he doesn't name Davon. And like I said, people are DMing me if it's about me, and I didn't really appreciate that. So perhaps I should have been more clear that I don't appreciate these subtweets and these shots at me about EQL haters. But I didn't, and instead I just left the word glazing in there, that I'm not glazing for brand deals. So as far as I was concerned, it was a shot for a shot, and I said it on the pod and not on Twitter, and that's how I was going to leave it. And of course, this is not hip hop and rap beefs, but you know how they say it on rap that you should put it on wax. And that's what I did. I put it on the podcast. I put it on wax. Because really, I don't want any sneaker Twitter war with him. I don't want any beef with him. He's got beef with other people. I don't want to be included with that. I don't have time in my day to be constantly in a war on Twitter. But I will stand up for myself and I will do shot for a shot and leave it at that. And if I say in response to him, you'll be all right, you can take the criticism, I truly mean that. I think anyone can take this kind of criticism and kind of learn from it and build from it. But, maybe I was wrong for taking a sniper shot as a response for a response kind of thing. It should have been just more directly critical and stuck to the facts that if you have some sort of business interest or potential business interest, then everything you say about it can be interpreted as if that business interest is in play. But that whole aside, the simple fact is we're just not going to agree on some things. And he says some things that I would never say. And that's how it is with a lot of people. Even friend of the show, Davon, like 60 to 80% of the things he says, I would not say. Or I would not say them the way he says them. And that's fine. You can appreciate people for who they are and the perspectives they bring to the table, even if sometimes you don't like the way they bring it to the table, or, once in a while how they say it. So we're just going to be different on some things. We're going to be polar opposites. And one thing that we're going to be on total opposite sides on is this quest for brand deals and seeded sneakers. And everyone is free to build something, to go for that, to go for these brand deals, to go for a collab sneaker or whatever it is. And I'm just, not on that trail. I'm not on that path up that mountain. Like, I just create content kind of for myself and what I think people would enjoy. And that's what I care about. And, I don't try to make this a career. I have a house and a family, and I sleep in a big bed with my wife. And that's what I really, truly care about. And the sneakers that I like to wear, that's what I care about. And this is not really just an issue with Kari or anything. This is just the era that we're in now. It's like this influencer era where you've followed them for a long time and you're on the journey with them as they climb the mountain, as they get brand deals, or as they get sneaker collabs, or whatever they're chasing. And there's this one influencer person I've been following on Instagram for ages, and she had a post about Netflix games. And in the video, she was talking about how she loves Netflix games app. And I didn't believe a second of it. And when you looked at the comments, a lot of the comments were just people that said, "Get your bag, girl." And that's just where we are now. You can be on this quest to get paid by brands, and your people will follow you and appreciate that you are doing it. So I see a lot of that. I feel like I'm surrounded by that. And I personally just feel like I'm just a relic from the old internet days, from the blogger era, the Tumblr era, the early Twitter shitposting era. You wouldn't last an hour in the asylum where they raised me. So I kind of create content from that point of view, from that era. So as I've said, Jesus and Mero, they used to say their podcast was art. So I treat this as art, and it's not commerce. So I can put myself in a position where I can put James Whitner on the podcast cover and I can say, "Ho no," and not a happy ending for James Whitner. Whereas other people might want to consider that I might want to work with James Whitner one day. I might want to have my product in his store one day. I know for a fact my socks are not going to be in his store for that day, so I don't even think about it or consider it. So I just feel like my path is different, that I'm not on this journey to be this huge successful influencer. My popularity has probably already peaked and it's on the way down for me. And the older I get, the less I'll probably do this. So consider this a relic, and when I'm gone, everyone will be surrounded by influencers and you'll be on the journey along with them. And the people who are on this journey, whether it's like influencers or sneaker collaborators or James Whitner and his store, I am cheering them on. I am on the journey with them. I do want to see them succeed, but they're not above criticism. If J-Tips is having some shipping issues and people are waiting 40 days and he's in the replies saying people are chasing Twitter clout because they haven't got their shoes after 40 days, I think it's fair to say that's not a good thing to do. If James Whitner is saying, people are only talking about the bad stuff and not talking about the good stuff, the bad stuff that we're talking about, that was the feds saying that and accusing you of that. So it's fair to talk about what the feds are putting in legal documents in court cases. At the same time, I'm not trying to be like this influencer policeman or anything like that I gotta police all these influencers. I'm just saying that I don't want to see bad stuff in the community. I don't want to see promoting of fakes. I don't want to see privacy violated. I don't want to do any of that stuff that should be wrong on this journey of people going up this mountain to whatever their goal is, the brand deals, the sneaker collabs, whatever. And maybe that will all change. Maybe one day I'll be advertising Netflix games app and everyone in the replies will be, "Go get your bag, girl." So if people are upset with me for anything that I had to say, even though nothing I said about the EQL thing has been refuted, they can put it on wax. They can put it on their podcast and I can take that feedback. And if I got something that was wrong, I can take it. But all these incidents, you can either treat it as someone just being a hater, or you can treat it as a lesson, or you can treat it as a blessing. I thought that I was trying to help EQL with the privacy stuff. And maybe they just didn't like the way I said things. So if it's hate or if it's a lesson or if it's a blessing, that's kind of up to you and your mindset and how you perceive things. But if you listen to the Sockjig sneaker podcast, well, that's when the blessings come in. So you open your hands up like a funnel and let the blessings come in. Some other news I wanted to get into. I wanted to briefly talk about StockX being available on Walmart, and this is on Walmart's site, their marketplace site as they call it. This is not at brick and mortar stores. And what it really means is that pairs that are already on StockX marked as instant ship will appear on Walmart's site, just like these third-party sellers can sell on Walmart. And that instant ship stuff, it's very much like how GOAT has instant shipping as well too. Usually it's only big bulk resellers or retail stores that have access to that instant ship. They are authorized sellers for StockX. And I think those shoes are marked as pre-verified, or they just trust the big bulk reseller to have legit pairs. So why this makes sense is that Walmart can now sell Nikes or Asics shoes without having to deal with Nike or Asics. And Walmart is in this constant competition with big box retailers, their online sites, and of course Amazon. And so if you can then all of a sudden offer a hot shoe, the GR hot shoe that people want across the country, and make it available on your site without having to deal with Nike or Asics, that's a big win. And StockX is already this under retail graveyard for a long time during this sneaker recession that we have. So in a way, all those under retail shoes, even those Jordan 1s that are for cheap on instant ship before the Jordan 1 even releases, maybe now they'll be available on Walmart. I don't know exactly what qualifies for being on Walmart and what doesn't. But the real answer of why this makes sense is because some customers simply trust Walmart more than they would trust StockX. Say an example of this is there's a teen in, say, North Dakota or somewhere where they've asked their parents for the hot pink Asics 1130. And those sneakers are $90 retail and they're not available in North Dakota, in the city they're from. And so that family searches Google for those shoes and StockX or GOAT appears, but they don't know StockX or GOAT. They're not sneakerheads. But it might appear on the third listing on Walmart's site, but they know Walmart. They already got an account from there. They might do their online grocery shopping or something from there. So they might not have an account for StockX or GOAT and don't know anything about the fees and all the ship to US and authenticate. Like they don't care about any of that stuff. They just want this Asics 1130 for their teenager. And so if they're available on Walmart for say $150 and shipping is free and the item still can be returned within 14 days, well then that makes a lot of sense. So overall, I think it could be a good thing. It could be good for people in North Dakota that don't have to deal with StockX and GOAT. It really is up to StockX and GOAT to get their name out there and be more known. So if they can do it as in partnership with Walmart, they can borrow some of the trust that Walmart already has with customers across the country. That would be good for them. It might be good for these retail stores that are marked as instant ship on StockX, if that's what they are, or the bulk resellers, if that's who they are. So I think it should be all right. I think it could be a win-win. I don't think it's going to be a lot of super hype shoes of someone buying some $500 CPFMs on Walmart site. I guess it could be, but I'm guessing it'll be more of these slightly above retail GR shoes that are hard to find across the country. Another story I wanted to talk about that I guess I broke on Twitter is that TwoJsKicks of Urban Necessities is no longer working at Urban Necessities. And you may know him as the owner of Urban Necessities, him and his wife. And so I guess that answers that he is no longer at his own company. And so I was tipped off on this, that he seems to be out and no one's really talked about it or mentioned it yet. I don't really follow him on Instagram, and so I didn't notice. So I went to the Urban Necessities IG page, and sure enough, he was scrubbed from their socials. He was not being followed. And I looked around to see if anyone else had talked about it. I didn't really see anything on Twitter, and on Instagram in the UN IG comments, I could see there's a few comments about it, and I could see references to comments being deleted about it. So in terms of the ownership situation at Urban Necessities, I guess this is a story from a few years ago. Apparently, the shoe surgeon and his business partner, Dallas Imbimbo, bought a stake of Urban Necessity a few years ago. I don't know exactly how long the time frame is there. And so This I had heard about in passing before, and I had seen people talking about it here and there. And if you look at some of the promo materials, there's a lot of like cross promotion of surgeon stuff at Urban Necessities. So I guess that makes sense. And a side note about Dallas Imbimbo is that he is the partner of Shoe Surgeon, and he is also named in the Nike lawsuit. And that lawsuit basically says as soon as this partner was brought on, he transitioned from this cobbler to this CEO and founder of Shoe Surgeon Enterprises, or whatever they're called. And the lawsuit basically says that that's the turning point. When the new partner came on is when they started doing this mass infringing and mass counterfeiting of Nike products, allegedly. So that is someone who could be involved, the surgeon and his partner. I don't know if there are other investors. I know there was some store in Saudi Arabia, so maybe there's Saudi investors. Maybe the Crown Prince kicked him out. I don't know. So I know that TwoJsKicks' wife was sick a while back, so maybe that is a reason why he sold it. If it's medical bills, if it's just to open new stores, if it's, the sneaker boom, sell out at a high, or maybe to pay for all the marble at that Las Vegas store. Maybe that's why they cashed out. It was really expensive marble. But it shows that if he's out, that he did not have controlling interest. He did not have principal voting powers or whatever you need in a company. He must have given that up if he's voted out of his own company. So whatever deal he made to sell off ownership, either he needed better lawyers in those negotiations to keep majority voting shares of ownership of his own company, or he had no other choice and had to sell off those as well. Maybe he gave power of attorney to these people. I don't know if you've seen Rocky V, but basically if you give up power of attorney, you could lose your whole business and you could be broke. It doesn't seem that 2J's is broke. He seems to be out there and having a good time. It doesn't seem like he's talking about it. I was told that he was on a recent IG Live and people were asking him about it, and he basically said that he couldn't talk about it. He is selling free 2J's t-shirts at SneakerCon, so I'm sure he'll eventually talk about it. It's possible that when he was kicked out or whatever happened, that he must have signed some sort of non-disparagement agreement or something where you can't say anything for, say, 18 months or 6 months or whatever it is. Even that is just my guess. I don't know. Maybe he just doesn't want to talk about it. But news is he's out. I don't know what happened. I sort of broke the news, and it seemed like some people did know a lot about it, and I guess the IG comments knew about it, but a lot of people who saw the tweet and were replying and co-tweeting did not know about it at all. So that's why I guess I posted it. So hopefully he made out well money-wise, and his wife is fine, and health and all that kind of stuff. So good luck to him. Another story that affected a particular niche of customers was JSM Customs on Instagram was accused of selling custom fakes, allegedly. And before I talk about this, I just want to make a disclaimer, as I'm, want to do. There's nothing wrong if you want a hand-cobbled pair of customs on a legit Nike sneaker. I just wanted to say that out front. I'm not going to be talking about that, if customs are really fakes or not. If you want a customizer to modify a legit pair of, say, Jordan 1 lows and make it look like an Off-White or Union or both, that is totally up to you. There's nothing wrong with that. I might think it's an abomination, but other people do not, and they like it and they want it, and so there's nothing wrong with it. But the issue is, if that pair is made of fake materials, then it's no different than any other counterfeits or fakes. This started with one customizer, the Chef Hui Lee guy, calling out this JSM 801 customs. And the post said something about, where's the integrity in the customs game? And I just thought, oh, great. Two customizers are fighting over some bullshit. And that was kind of sort of part of it, because it was like one customizer was accusing another customizer of ripping off their style of ripping off Union and Off-White. Only I thought of ripping off Union and Off-White like this. So you can't rip off me ripping off Union and Off-White. Do your own rip off. So when I first skimmed it, that's what I assumed it was, and I was just going to move on because who cares? But when I actually read the post, it was a little bit deeper than that. He was actually, the Chef Hui Lee guy was accusing this JSM guy of using fake Jordan 1s as a base and not a legit pair, but still charging $1,000 for them, which is obviously wrong, especially if the customers are expecting legit pairs and expecting hand-cobbled customs. So I'm not going to go into the whole detail of all the screenshots and everything of what was said. Basically, the guy said that he's always made these hand customs And then he changed his story and said he's leveraging external resources, which just means he's getting fakes from China. And then he admitted as much in the IG comments where people were asking them, are they factory made fakes or are they hand customs? And he said, quote, it's a mix of both to keep it 100. So, I guess when I'm saying allegedly and accused, I guess he's admitting it right there. And really, this is not that different than the shoe surgeon case that I outlined in the previous episode of him mass producing fakes. The thing is, customs take a long time to do. If you were going to hand dye a pair of sneakers, all that dipping and waiting for them to dry, that takes forever. You got to wait like hours for that thing to dry, do it the next day. So if you want some sort of sunset bullshit on it, that's going to take you forever to do all those colors, hand dipping and drying. Then on top of that, if you are ripping up a Jordan 1, that stuff is glued on tight. I don't know how you're going to do that, but boiling water, whatever those YouTube videos where they show how they do that stuff, that's a ton of work. And so if you're ripping that up and putting ostrich fur or whatever in there, that too is a ton of work and not easy to do. Meanwhile, these customizers, they got DMs and waiting lists of people who want these. They want that legit hand-cobbled pair experience. And so if the waiting list is huge, and you can only really do, say, 1 or 2 a week if you're full-time at it. If you're part-time at it, you got a real 9 to 5. You could probably do 1 a month, I guess. That just means you're leaving money on the table. Just because it takes too much work and you got this huge list of people with just cash in their hand waiting to give it to you. So some of these people, like this JSM Customs guy and shoe surgeon allegedly, solved this bottleneck by just having fakes made. So congrats, you're now a counterfeiter. If you advertise them as fakes and customers know that they're fakes, you're not exactly scamming customers, but you're still a counterfeiter. If you advertise them as hand-cobbled customs, but they're really just fakes, then you're a full-on scammer and a counterfeiter, especially if people think that it's going to get a real hand-cobbled pair made from a legit Nike sneaker. The other aspect of this was similar to the last episode where, I was saying the friends of surgeon are kind of helping him out by not talking about the counterfeiting part. So this JSM guy is good friends with AD Sneaks, the photographer guy on Instagram. And that AD Sneaks guy has posted photos of these customs many times before. So when this news broke that day, I saw a reply that said that, the AD Sneaks guy has scrubbed all these customs off his Instagram page. So I don't follow him either. So I went to go look and sure enough, they were gone. I checked the stories. There was no post about it or any info about it. So no post or no comment, just those photos are gone. And maybe he thought that would fuck up his own brand deals or the perception of him being associated with some guy who is basically admitting to having fakes. So one thing I knew was that those two were friends. That AD Sneaks guy and this JSM Customs guy are friends. That they're both from Utah and they hung out and they played ball together. And I know that because I listened to the both of them on my First Kicks sneaker podcast. They were on there and they were talking about their friendship. And I didn't remember the exact details, but I knew that they had said on there that they were friends. I also know that the AD Sneaks guy has posted fakes in the past. He posted some early pairs from these sneaker knockers groups, these Gratitude 11s. And he admitted as much that they smelled weird and bad and he learned not to post early pairs again. And so he removed those photos as well too. So I just want to make it clear that I'm not trying to police all these influencers and who's nice and who's not nice or anything like that. It really is just about fakes. I don't like fakes in the community, and sneaker culture is rooted on weeding these kind of fake people out. So if people are knowingly promoting fakes, I have a real problem with it. So that's all this really is about. I don't really care if they're nice or not nice. I just don't want someone to knowingly promote fakes as if they're not fakes. And then I don't want people to be duped into buying fakes because they saw someone that they like who approved of them. So when it came to this AD Sneaks guy, I know he was friends with him. And I had heard it on the podcast where they said so much. And so I really just wanted to know, is he part of the con? He didn't seem like he is, but I don't know. And I think it was fair to ask. So I knew they were friends, and I knew that he had previously posted fake photos of Gratitude 11s, but I wasn't just going to attack him with all that information. So I was like, let me just ask, because it's not like he posted in his IG stories that I disavowed this guy and his fakes. He just scrubbed them all instead. A lot of this was already top of mind because I just did cover it in the last episode with the surgeon and his sneaker media friends seemingly not talking about him allegedly mass producing counterfeits. So I just quote tweeted 80 Sneaks on Twitter where he had posted this JSM sneakers just a week ago, and I just quote tweeted and said fakes question mark. And really that's all I just want to know, for him to say something about it, that I don't know anything about the fakes or I do know something about the fakes, whatever he was going to say. So when I asked that, some people came to his defense, like he wouldn't do that and he's not like that. And I know people could be nice and stuff like that, but it's also crazy to me that people would just definitively answer for someone else, because how do you know for sure? But even asking a valid question like that, people just assume it's an attack, that I'm out to get the guy, that I just viciously attacked the guy for having fakes, when all I did was write fakes question mark. And like I said, I'm not on the journey with a lot of these influencers on their journey to more success. I'm just seeing and consuming what they say. And if I have a criticism or question about it, I will ask that question or criticize them about it. But other people are on the journey with all these influencers. And so they're like, how dare you not be on the journey with this guy? And they don't care what I'm talking about, that if he's friends with him or is he possibly part of the scheme. And that's the other thing. Anytime I did talk about it, I always added qualifiers like if and possibly or allegedly or whatever like that. I'm not just going to accuse someone of something if I don't know it. But like I said earlier, this is just the era that we're in now. So he saw it later and then started replying on Twitter, because, sometimes Instagram people would just stay on Instagram and Twitter people would just stay on Twitter. I'm kind of like that. I might check Instagram later in the day. And he replied and he said, no, he didn't know. And he just found out just like everyone else did. And then he kind of took a shot at what I was saying here, and which I get. I understand why people are going to be upset by how things are worded, and because they're going to feel more than they're going to read the actual words. And he said a shot like, oh, everyone's just quick to assume everything when all I did was take photos of his product for him. And keep in mind, I already knew that they are friends and then they played basketball together and they hang out. And I did not say that directly to him. I did not even say it directly in the tweets about it. I did say it in replies to people who asked me questions about it. And so that is when I had to kind of show the clip of him saying that on the My First Kicks podcast, that they actually hang out all the time and they hang out once a week when they play ball, and they even volunteers in it that they talk about everything. And the other guy says everything. And so that is all information that I knew, and I wasn't just going to use it to attack the person when I wanted him to kind of answer for it first, if that makes sense. So if he did not say that everyone's just quick to assume everything, I wouldn't have said anything. I would have said, thanks for the answer. Cool. And I would have moved on with my day. But then I had to reply and say, look, you say here that you're close friends and you guys talk about everything. So that is why I want to know if you are in on all this. So after that, he was nice. He is a nice guy. And he said, no, I did not know. I found out same time as everyone else did. And he posted a statement about it, clarifying as much. And I guess I kind of bullied him into making a statement about it. But like I said, weeding out fakes and fake promoters is one of the first things that anyone ever did in online sneaker culture. So I do kind of feel bad that I had to dunk on the guy. I wasn't really trying to dunk on him. I really just wanted to know. And he answered and he gave a good answer. And I get it. You're not going to know someone's entire business. Like behind the scenes, if they were replacing real pairs with fake pairs, I get it. You're not going to know every single thing about some of the people that you know in your life. So if he's your guy and you're upset that I attacked him, I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to attack him. I'm just trying to root out fakes and fake promoters. And he can go back to his floating photos and whatever he needs to do. Tom Sachs is back with Nike, and Nike put out a statement saying, quote, Tom has demonstrated and recommitted to fostering a culture of respect and inclusivity, end quote. And I guess, whatever the due diligence, the check that they did on this guy, they found out he's rehabilitated apparently. I wonder how that went. Did Tom Sachs have to go to some corporate retraining program? Did he have to attend HR sessions? Did they look over his material and be like, yeah, Tom Sachs, about your, some of the stuff that you talk about on your videos and your programs and your bullshit, we're going to have to edit some of that stuff. The Tom Sachs 10 bullets? And number 8, always been knowing. We tested that phrase. Apparently, a lot of people don't know what that actually means. Some people thinks it means, dingling your junk in your tidy whities on Zoom calls. So how about we change it to always be respectfully looking? What do you think, Tom? And maybe Tom Sachs just sat there with dead eyes and just gave a little thumbs up. But Tom Sachs did put out his own statement saying, quote, "I'm honored that we will continue to build together as a Nike craft team and community. The Mars Yard 3.0 is in its final stage of development and is currently being wear tested. I'm excited to share more soon," end quote. And I've seen some wear test photos of it, and it looks like a black Mars Yard, but sometimes wear test pairs are black. So I don't know if that's going to be the final color or anything, or if it's just going to be a tweak to the 2.0. But everything is back on track, and Nike stood by Tom Sachs. And technically, Tom Sachs didn't break any laws. He wasn't charged with anything. He was accused of being an abusive and kind of gross boss, I guess. He was shitty to women that worked for him. And in the original article that came out, it alleged that he was on a Zoom call with Nike employees, female Nike employees, in his white underwear. So whatever that he did, he's apparently demonstrated and recommitted to fostering a culture of respect now. So maybe in those HR rehabilitation sessions, he promised he'd be wearing pants in all future Zoom calls. And somewhere a Nike egghead just said, nodded, and just checked off something on their little checklist. Rehabilitation complete. And when the article first dropped, he did put out an apology tour. He did put out some generic corporate speak statements where he said he was laser focused on improving. I'm sure that's exactly what he meant. That's what he was trying to do. He was laser focused. And when an artist is speaking in corporate speak, you know that there's money on the line. And ultimately, that is probably why they brought him back. They shelved him for a year. They probably thought that's enough, but there was probably money at stake. Maybe he was mid-contract, or the shoes are already in production. They don't want to just put all those shoes in a wood chipper. If it was at the end of contract, it's way easier to just cut bait with someone, like they did with Kyrie. And when they're in the middle of a contract, you're going to stick with someone like they did with Ja Morant and Tiger Woods at the time. And even the money at stake, it's not really that much money if you think about it, but when you're a big company, any money is money. You're not just going to throw it in a wood chipper, especially when across the board market is saying that you're down. And really, they're relying on people not caring, especially sneakerheads. This whole collection is geared for sneakerheads. It's not geared for the average consumer. It kind of was at one point with the Kohl's release of the general purpose shoe. So I'm curious to see if they will go on that front again, or will they bring it back to this Mars Yard 3.0 and back to a limited drop for sneakerheads. And as I've been saying, that you can treat sneakerheads like shit. They don't care. They will forgive. They will say, "Where's my shipping?" That's what they care more about than this kind of stuff. And the original article, when the allegations came out, it even said the art world doesn't care because Tom's got a space in art world. He's cemented his stature in the art world. And so the art world doesn't care. You can go work for one shitty boss over here or another shitty boss over there. So I'm really curious to see the marketing that they use when they bring him back. Can they continue to do the same marketing they were always doing? Like I joked, can they still be saying, "always be knowing"? What do you mean by that, Tom Sachs? I need you to explain that to me, because you got this weird case about you. And even this whole NASA association, what does NASA have to say? Did NASA sign off on all this? Did NASA say he's laser focused on rehabilitation? Are they all right with their name being associated with this seemingly creepy guy, allegedly? So Nike bringing him back, you can judge Nike by their actions, not by their marketing, because they are going to go forward and always have this aspirational marketing, especially towards women. They're going to say, "Imagine you're a strong female athlete. We represent the strongest female athletes. We support the strongest female athletes." Meanwhile, their actions don't always coincide with what they say. When track star Allison Felix was pregnant, they basically told her to get back on track. When their own employees were saying Tom Sachs was in his underwear, Tom Sachs is back and he's got a 3.0 Mars Yard on the way. So all this stuff, maybe sneakerheads don't care. Maybe all they really care about is shipping. Maybe guys don't care. Maybe women will only care. And Nike is probably counting on the fact that that's a small number of people and there's not enough people who are even aware of Tom Sachs, and counting on you to forget about it. Some executive at Nike in the late 70s or early 80s or whatever wrote these 9 or 10 rules of Nike. And, one of them was you're on offense all the time. And one of them was, it won't be pretty. And they've since had an updated version of that. I think it's called the Nike Maxims. And one of the newer Maxims is do the right thing. So did they do the right thing here? It honestly doesn't seem like it. Was there a huge clamor for these Tom Sachs shoes? Somewhat. Really, some of it had been basically forgotten in a year. That's kind of all it takes. It just takes time. But because stuff was already in production, I think is why we're getting stuff. And so, they're saying he's rehabilitated. They're saying he's laser focused and that he's all right now. He's rehabbed now. And, I'll believe it when I see it. When he's paraded out there in these marketing materials, you can probably just see it in his eyes if he's truly sorry about what happened or if he was just kind of seething and upset about it that he got shelved for a while. And so, I don't really believe that he's rehabbed. I don't see any reason for him to have rehabbed, especially if his standing in the art world didn't change. But there's product to move and there's product to sell. We can't just have it sit in the warehouse. This stuff is being wear tested. It's got to be sold. And so, as one of those original rules said, it won't be pretty. Speaking of doing the right thing, James Whitner and his Whitaker Group has been in the sneaker news lately. So we'll take it from the top. The big story that dropped first was that he is not being charged in his federal case, and he is giving up the claim to the $1.2 million of allegedly laundered money. In that case, his lawyers had actually pushed the deadline to submit the claim that the money was his 4 times before eventually giving up and letting it go to the feds. And Michael Sykes of Kicks You Wear newsletter had good analysis on this, basically saying that if he tried to prove that the money is his, then he's putting himself in a position where he could be charged. Whereas right now, if he gives it up, it's more likely that he's not going to be charged. And then the next day, the Whitaker Group posted an official statement saying that the U.S. Attorney's Office had basically declined prosecution and, quote, based upon, among other things, the sufficiency of admissible evidence to support prosecution, end quote. And then right after that, he basically says, quote, the outcome reaffirms our stance all along of the integrity of our business, end quote. It's hilarious to, back to back saying, hey, that evidence couldn't be submitted, and then talk about integrity. But hey, I didn't write the statement. That's James Whitner's statement. So he basically beat the allegations. He's not being charged. He just had to give up $1.2 million. And really, this is a federal case. It's about the Chinese criminal group allegedly money laundering. And they're the ones doing this money laundering through whatever conduits they can. This might include prostitution rings and drug smuggling and allegedly sneaker boutiques. Anyone that needed money to be cleaned, they provided that service. And so that is probably what the real federal case is about. And so when James Whitner's associate, Antwain Freeman, pled guilty that he was involved, that he had $1.2 million, the feds seized the money from him, and he's the one who got that money from a Chinese bike courier, they were probably more likely going after that whole Chinese boss, the big tuna in this whole thing. So if I can go into speculation mode here, this is just podcast speculation mode, so I can't be charged for anything I say here. Basically, I'm saying is, it's possible that Antwain Freeman has been cooperating with feds since he pled guilty. It's possible he said, F you feds, I'm not telling you anything as well. So, but if the feds are not really after these conduits, they're not really after the prostitutes and the sneaker boutiques, they're really after the big tuna, the big Chinese tuna, whoever's in charge of this whole money laundering ring. So if Whitner is not being charged either, then it's conceivable that James Whitner himself is cooperating with feds. It's possible he said, here's where I was told to meet. Here's who said who's going to give me the money. I will give you all this information, the only information I have. I'm not going to be charged. How's that? Is that a deal? I don't know. Like I said, I'm in speculation mode here. And, the deadline to the claimant was delayed 4 times. They asked it to be delayed. It's not like they gave up the claim right away and were fighting it the whole time. And so, obviously, to give the other side of it, it's definitely possible that they're not cooperating with feds at all. And they basically told the feds nothing. And, they had James Whitner on wiretap saying, something's off about this. And, they're more celebrating that evidence is not going to be admissible. So, it's definitely plausible where, they're like, F you feds, you got nothing on me. And the feds did allege in that whole charge thing that James Whitner broke his contract with Nike by backdooring all these sneakers. And so backdooring sneakers is not against the law. That's just violating a contract that you have, a business contract. Money laundering and not declaring money at the banks, that's the stuff that's against the law. But it's also fair to ask if this is how James Whitner built his entire empire, if that's how he built all these stores in an era where not that many other people were building multiple stores in multiple cities. In the last 15 years, we've had Kith, but Ronnie has been known throughout it all, and you saw him building step by step. But whatever it is, whatever the founding of the company, I guess we'll never know the truth. We'll just know what James Whitner himself has to say about it. And so I will talk about that Adidas stuff, but I want to talk about him doing this interview with Complex as well. So Complex had this interview with James Whitner, and it was done by Arya Hughes, the editor-in-chief of Complex. And first off, I think it's hilarious that all the editors are giving themselves YouTube shows and putting themselves as talent in front of things. Meanwhile, everyone else, you guys write the articles, you guys make some vertical video TikToks for us, or, like Lei Takanashi, you're getting laid off. So you guys don't get a show, we get a show. But Arya Hughes herself, the first thing that I noticed is that she did not disclose that she is in the While You Were Sleeping film video that James Whitner did. So isn't it kind of like a conflict of interest to interview someone when you were talent for that person merely weeks ago? And let alone, isn't it a huge conflict of interest for editors-in-chiefs to be talent in anything? But that is probably just me. It's probably more head of content these days. An editor-in-chief, in my mind, takes me back to newspaper days and integrity and ethics and stuff like that. But as I said, we're not in that era anymore. We're in content creator, everyone's talent kind of era right now. Even the editors-in-chiefs are talent now. So the thing is, when you are hired to be talent, and then you are then reversed in a position where you are then interviewing that person that hired you to be talent, are you going to ask hard-hitting questions, or are you going to pull punches? You were just doing a product showcase for this person. Are you still doing a product showcase for this person? Are you doing PR for this person? The solution is, of course, you ask the appearance of hard-hitting questions, when really it's just a bunch of softballs. And that's what we got with this entire interview. And maybe this is because the editor-in-chief has taken a break from being an editor-in-chief and has put themselves in front of the camera to be on-air talent, and they're not experienced with interviewing and all that stuff, and that will grow in time. Or is this whole thing, just like I said, a product showcase where they don't want to disrupt the flow of access, disrupt the back and forth PR machine? And it's possible some sneaker influencers are listening to me talk about this and being like, wow, you are right, Sockjig. I did not think of it like that. But more importantly, how do I get myself to be in James Whitner's videos? Because that's just the era we're in now. But back to the interview, and when asked about the case and how did it come up, and James Whitner basically said that they were the victim of their own success, that they grew too fast, and he even found it a little bit overwhelming and thought it was a bit crazy how things are going, and they didn't have sophisticated accounting. And then later she asked him, what did you think of the coverage of the case? And I'm just sitting here thinking like, you're the editor-in-chief of the biggest sneaker media outlet out there. You're the one greenlighting all the coverage right now. You tell us what you think of the coverage. Why do you need validation of the person that you're covering? I don't know. I just thought it was a completely useless question, especially coming from an editor-in-chief. An editor-in-chief should never be asking a subject that they're covering that question. And really, it was just a layup for James Whitner to talk about the people who gave him bad coverage and complain about that coverage, which is what you would do if you were doing PR for that person. Yes, Mr. Whitner, the feds are alleging you are backdooring, and it's possible your entire business was built on this backdooring, and you had opened stores when everyone else was closing stores, but please tell us what you think about the people who were mean to you when they talked about this. How did you feel when these people were so mean to you? Just pathetic. And James Whitner basically answered the softball question with a non-answer, because there is no real answer. He just said that, people talk about all this bad stuff, but they never talked about all our good stuff. Just like what I was saying, if you're not on the journey with someone up the mountain, then you are hindering them and you are hurting them. And what are you doing? Why are you criticizing us? We're trying to get up this mountain here. What? What did the Fed say? I don't care what the Fed said. We're trying to get up this mountain here. That's what's really important. But I don't really know if he was talking about me there, if he was talking about Instagram comments or anyone else being mean to him. I mean, I was making fun of it and I was doing memes and stuff. And The actual podcast that I did about it was actually pretty critical, but also fair, I thought. But, I don't know if he listened to that podcast or anything, so he's probably just talking about the Instagram comments. But I was treating it like the expose and scandal that it was. I was meeting it at its level. While everyone else was wondering about when am I getting shipping on my Jordan 4s, I was at least making jokes about it and trying to make light about it. But if the feds are accusing you of not being that different than prostitutes and drug smugglers, then that is pretty scandalous. The other question he's asked is, were you backdooring? And James Whitner just kind of pauses and laughs. He gives an answer like, the breadth of our business is inventory management. We're not really reselling. We're not really backdooring. We're inventory managing. We're asset acquisition and redistribution managers. Whatever. So he gives us this other non-answer that, they weren't backdooring. They basically have an outlet store. And that is what people think that they were doing. And that's not really an answer at all. Like, the feds basically allege that you broke the Nike contract. And so Arya didn't ask about that because why would she grill someone that she was just a talent for? She was in the video promoting the While You Were Sleeping collection. So like I said, you're not really going to get any answers from James other than the answers that he wants to give. So other questions that James asked, he was fine. He had good answers for some of that stuff. And overall, the thing was just a PR showcase. It was barely an interview. There was no hard-hitting questions. There was the appearance of hard-hitting questions. There was no follow-ups when he gave non-answers. And it was a huge disappointment to me that she did not even disclose the conflict of interest, that she is a talent. The editor-in-chief is a talent in the video for this person that she's interviewing. I just find it really rich when some of these complex people pull out their journalism credentials, and when it's time to do journalism, they go into PR mode. They're not editors-in-chiefs. They don't have this Northwestern journalism degree. All of a sudden, they're paid promoters. And if you point this out to them, then all of a sudden you're a hater or you're uninformed. You don't work in the industry like I do. Whatever. I don't work PR for James Whitner. Sure. All right, I'm getting all heated up here, so let me just take a little break here, and then I'll talk about the potential Adidas deal. So watch for the little swoosh sound. So it was reported recently by Lois Sakani, friend of the show, Lois Sakani of Snobette, that James Whitner and his Whitaker Group are possibly looking at a multi-shoe partnership with Adidas. And nothing is official. This is all allegedly and in the works. It doesn't seem like anything is signed. No one would give any confirmation on the Adidas side. And not just like a 1 or 2 shoe showcase like they've done with Adidas before and with New Balance right now. So if James Whitner goes to Adidas, it'll be also interesting to see what kind of models that he works with, because I know Adidas is keen on heating up the superstar. The CEO has been talking about it in the quarterly results that they do. And I'm sure they would love to get it at that GR success level that Air Force Ones and Asics 1130s have gotten to. And of course, they got the Samba there, but you have to think about multiple franchises. It'll also be interesting to see if the hype follows, because people love the A Ma Maniére Jordan 3, the first one that came out. But that's because people love the Jordan 3. They love the storytelling behind that shoe, of course. They love both. But people love the Jordan 3. Are there Adidas silhouettes that people love as much as people love the Jordan 3? Maybe. But are there the same number of fans that will buy the product as much as they will buy the Jordan 3? Probably not, and that's why you got to create some hype, and create some hype on a silhouette that people love. And the easiest way to do that initially, of course, is to drop it with low stock. I'm also kind of curious to see how James will respond to the apparent fatigue to his style of storytelling. And honestly, I don't know if it's the fatigue to his style of storytelling or if the stock numbers are just too high for the Jordans. So whatever it is, that first shoe with Adidas most likely is going to have low stock, and it's probably going to be whatever the baseline is. If it's 1,000 or 2,000, it's probably not going to be 30,000 or 20,000, whatever these Jordan 4s have been numbering lately. I don't think he can do that right away at Adidas. You have to build some hype, of course. But the other question is, does this mean that the relationship with Nike is over? And is he only going to be releasing sneakers with Adidas going forward after a certain period of time, which I'm going to talk about. But first, say it is over and say he is just going with Adidas only. His infrastructure and warehouses and everything that he's built has been built up to be selling 30,000, whatever big number of sneakers consistently. So if he's got all these employees and he's got all these warehouses for all these sneakers, and now if he's switching to Adidas, if all of a sudden he's got 1,000 sneakers to box up and ship, well, at least your shipping will hopefully be a little bit faster. And it was said in the article that James Whitner could still be working with Nike and Jordan at the same time because they've got Jordan shoes coming up all the way till fall 2025. And this is what I wanted to talk about. If James Whitner can release shoes with Nike, with Jordan, with Adidas, with New Balance, and it's not like it's unprecedented. It has been done before. The one that everyone comes up with is Kith. Kith has worked with every sneaker brand. And another one that goes kind of under the radar is Undefeated. They've done Adidas shoes, and of course they got Jordan 4s coming out next year, allegedly as well too. So there's this kind of discussion, and everyone has kind of seemingly accepted that it's definitely possible that all these brands work together with James Whitner at the same time. And color me skeptical. I just don't believe it. I just don't believe that Nike and Jordan will long-term continue to work with James Whitner past fall 2025. If I am proven wrong, I will say I was wrong, and I'll come back on this podcast and say I was wrong. But for now, consider me skeptical, which I'll talk about in a sec. But how James Whitner came to be at Adidas, if it does happen, is a very interesting question to think about. How did it come to be? Did Adidas approach him? Did he approach Adidas? Did Adidas find out that James Whitner didn't have a long-term contract with Nike and Jordan? Did Nike and Jordan say, hey, this Fed case came up. Maybe it's best if we just kind of wrap it up after this fall 2025 shoes? So those are all the interesting questions that I don't think people have talked about as much lately. And they've just kind of settled and kind of agreed upon that this is just going to be one or two shoes, just like how he's been doing with New Balance and Jordan and Nike right now. But it's definitely possible that Adidas just courted him and said, hey, we need you to tell your stories over here. If you don't have a contract over there, why don't you bring your storytelling over here? Just like you've done with Ama Manier and Social Status and New Balance, Justice is Blind, Justice is, what was it called? Willful Bias, it was called. Or it's possible that Nike said to James Whitner, hey, the feds are after you. You've been backdooring all these years, and I think we're going to wrap it up with this contract after this collection. So kudos on a job done. And that's when James Whitner said, well, hey, I can maybe just cross the aisle. I can cross the Beaverton River over here. I can't actually remember if Adidas headquarters and Beaverton headquarters are on the same side of the river, but you know what I mean. And product timeline wise, like how can you have a deal with one company and then it ends, and then you go to another company and you already have a shoe ready to go? And Jerry Lorenzo kind of talked about this already, about how when he signed with Adidas, Adidas just announced it right away before they could secretly make a shoe. And it also came up with Clot and Adidas and Clot and Nike as well too. And I learned this from Eagles and Heat on Twitter. He's a very well-respected OG in sneaker Twitter and has inside knowledge about some of this kind of stuff. So when we're talking about Clot and Adidas and Clot and the Nike shoe, basically when his last Nike Dunk shoe was finished being developed, it was already agreed upon that his contract would be renewed, and that was it. And then after that, he was free to sign with someone else, but he could not announce it publicly until that last Dunk had released. So that could be a period of 18 months. That could be a period of 9 months, whatever it is. So that whole time, he's secretly working with Adidas and has a deal with them, but they can't legally announce anything because his contract with Nike does not end until a certain date, until that shoe is released. So that's how there could be this overlap where you kind of have a deal with two companies at the same time, but you can't announce one until the other one is officially over. And why I bring that up is because the exact same thing could be happening with James Whitner right now. He could have finished developing the shoes that are going to release in fall 2025 in the factory. They are now going to start to be made. Of course, they haven't done any campaigns and stuff for them, so he still has a deal with Nike all through the end of that contract, whatever it is. Let's say it's the end of 2025. But at the meantime, right now in this in-between phase, perhaps James Whitner is free to go to with Adidas and assign a partnership with them because he doesn't have an exclusive contract with Nike and Jordan. So that's how it works if you have a deal with one company and it ends and you are switching companies. But I saw a lot of comments where people just don't believe it, that he will continue to do shoes with Nike and Jordan, and then maybe he'll do a few shoes with Adidas and New Balance like he's been doing. But this ping pong back and forth of telling a story at Nike, at Jordan Brand, and then going to Adidas and telling a very similar story there, I just don't believe that Nike or Jordan Brand would allow it, that they would be happy with it. That traditionally, that is not how Nike operates. Traditionally, that's not how Jordan Brand operates. And traditionally, that's not how Michael Jordan himself operates when it comes to Adidas. So I'll believe it when I see it. And I know the current thing is already happening between Nike and Jordan Brand and New Balance. But New Balance is New Balance. They are not number two. They are not Adidas. They are not the long-term hated rival of Nike. Why would Nike allow the exact same kind of storytelling that you're telling at Jordan Brand, and then a few months later, the same person is telling a very similar kind of story at Adidas? And I know I'm using the words storytelling and James Whitner's kind of stories, but really I'm talking about his style of telling black stories. And maybe that's what Adidas wants. And maybe they think they are lacking in that in the casual footwear space. And so that's why they want him to, cross the aisle. And I'm also making the assumption that James Whitner is going to tell the kind of storytelling that he has already been telling, and he's going to continue to tell that and not try to change it up or go a different direction. And when Kith works with multiple sneaker brands, Ronnie can tell stories of different scopes. He can tell about his experience, of course, like his childhood memories and stuff, but that can include video games and watches and whatever. And it can include color palettes and stuff too. And when Undefeated does the same thing with different brands, they're just different stories all the time. Whereas if James Whitner wants to tell a story about black excellence at Jordan Brand and then goes to Adidas and wants to tell a story about black excellence there, I just think Nike and Jordan Brand will feel a certain way about it. And maybe it doesn't have anything to do with black excellence. I'm trying to be careful here. I'm not trying to talk about things that I have no business talking about. But what I'm really talking about is the competitive nature between Nike, Jordan Brand, and Adidas. And the other fact, of course, is that Michael Jordan himself does not want anything to do with Adidas. He doesn't want it around him. He's made little kids that are wearing Adidas shoes go change the shoes. Like that kind of stuff goes deep with Michael Jordan and it's never changed. Just ask Charles Barkley. So the last story in this whole chain of events in this last few weeks that dropped was that the Prosper location in New Jersey is closing. And Prosper is part of the Whitaker Group, and that is a James Whitner store. That is a Whitaker Group store, but it's not 100% ownership of James Whitner's store. The other part owner of that Prosper store is Antwain Freeman, his associate, his friend that was charged and pled guilty to having 1.2 million of alleged laundered money. So that part that Antwain Freeman is a part owner, I'm not sure how public knowledge that is. I'm sure a lot of people in New Jersey area know about it, but I'm sure the economy had a lot to do with closing down a store. But back to putting the speculation hat on and theorizing a bit, it is also possible that it's just because of this federal case between Antwain Freeman, James Whitner, Nike, the big Chinese tuna, everyone, that Nike has just said, maybe it's a good idea if you guys don't work together and if we don't work together. And it's also possible that all that is true, that it's because of the economy and it's because of the case. So that's why I just have this feeling that something more has gone on, that maybe there is this fissure between Nike and Jordan Brand and James Whitner. Because the other part that's not talked about, that no other sneaker podcast has really talked about other than myself, is that Michael Jordan himself is super close with the James Whitner. And that's why James Whitner has as much power as he does. And that's why I reported at the time that he is super high at Jordan Brand and has a lot of say in who gets collabs under Jordan Brand, like Nina Chanel and Eastside Golf, allegedly. And so I was always under the assumption that James Whitner is very protected by Michael Jordan himself. And so the big question is, because of this federal case, did Michael Jordan have no other choice in the matter? Did Nike say, hey, we can't be associated with this guy anymore. He's got a case about him. And perhaps Nike tried to say the same thing with Marcus Jordan and his whole backdooring case, but the feds were not after Marcus Jordan, but they were after James Whitner. If this is what happened, then of course Michael Jordan is going to stand by his own son and not by James Whitner, because blood is thicker than water. So it's possible that there is some sort of break in the relationship between James Whitner and Michael Jordan himself. And it's possible that Nike was forcing the hand, But this is all speculation on my part. This is all allegedly, but no other sneaker podcast is going to talk about this at this kind of level because, I'm free to talk about this. I'm free to speculate. I also don't have the burden of I have to get my editor in chief in James Whitner's videos, so I have to keep up appearances. The other big news, of course, was Nike CEO John Donahoe stepping down, and most likely, he was probably just told there's a door. We're not going to fire you, but it'd be great if you just kind of step down. And it probably would have been egg on their face if they fired him earlier, and that's probably why they tried to avoid it. But they were probably like, hey, his contract is coming up, and it's better to just end this right now. But really, it was like, we don't want you around here. Whatever you had, whatever you brought to the table did not work. And there was a lot of momentum around this, especially when it's coming to like media reports and stuff like that. If Bloomberg News are writing articles about how shitty the CEO is, then it's probably time. And all of the reports are basically the same, that he was, he's not a Nike guy. He's a career consultant. He's not a product guy. He worked at Bain and Company as a career consultant, and then he went to eBay, and both those places, they don't build anything. They don't have any products. So you're just not from a product point of view. Also, it was clear that employees hated him because, he made people come back to the office. He laid off people, of course. He said that, he accepts the blame, but then he really didn't accept the blame until now, until stepping down. He would have stepped down way earlier if he truly accepted the blame. And I was laughing because in Footwear News, there's an article where they dug through LinkedIn posts of various Nike employees and executives, and they were saying stuff like, prayers are answered. That literally means your employees were praying that the CEO gets canned. Please, God, I need you to remove this guy from the office. Please, anything. But this guy was brought on by Mark Parker, by Phil Knight, by the Nike CEO Board of Governors because their bet was on direct-to-consumer, DTC. And they saw it as the future, and especially around that COVID year when everything was online because there was no choice, because everyone was inside. But even those pieces were in place and moving before that. Of course, we've seen them canceling the contracts of small sneaker shops and those shops going out of business because they wanted to highlight DTC. So they brought in a career consultant, a guy who knows a lot about DTC from eBay and stuff. So here he is. Here's Mark Parker and Phil Knight's pick as the new CEO. But because it failed, it's all John Donahoe's fault. He's the guy who has to take the fall. All our problems, they were on that guy. He was the DTC guy, not us. Even though all along it was Mark Parker and Phil Knight and the Board of Governors that wanted this guy in place. So they don't get the blame as much as I've seen. I haven't seen anyone really directly criticizing Mark Parker and Phil Knight and the entire Board of Governors for the pick as well. And obviously a lot of it is on John Donahoe as well too. He didn't pivot early enough. The signs were there from like November 2021 or so, where the signs were there that, things are changing, that maybe you shouldn't ice out retail, maybe you shouldn't ice out Foot Locker and things like that. So, but now all our problems, that was all the fault of the last guy. That's what happens whenever there's a regime change. It's like, hey, it's a clean slate here. That's not our problem. It's the last guy's problem. And so new CEO Elliot Hill, I did not know much about this guy before this news came out, but it looks like he's everything that John Donahoe is not. He's a product guy. He's a Nike veteran. There was this LinkedIn history going around how he started as an intern all the way to CEO. And it's clear from that, even that Footwear News article, that employees love him. So they need someone with that deep Nike roots to bring back institutional knowledge to the products, to make employees happy, to have someone to cheer for and root for. But to bring it back to the Board of Governors and Mark Parker and Phil Knight and everyone, it's like, why did he retire the first time? Why did this guy just go, hey, I'm done here. I'm good. See you, Nike. Why was that guy gone? Was he the second place choice the previous time? Was he in the running, but he lost to this outsider career consultant guy? Did he not believe in direct-to-consumer as much as the board did? Then did he just quit out of frustration? Because, if I can't change anything, if I've reached my limit of where I can be in this organization, then I just got to go. I got to retire, basically. If that's the case, now it's a mea culpa. Now it's a second chance. No, We've pulled you from the reject pile and put you back in charge. You were the guy all along. We should have known this. And we here, of course, is Mark Parker and Phil Knight and the board of governors. So ultimately, they're the ones that did not want a product guy as a CEO. They wanted a career consultant. They wanted a Wall Street dude. So now it's like they're putting the pieces in place, but the turnaround won't exactly be quick. There's already been talk about, even in the previous earning calls and stuff, on how they need to archive their Force One and Dunk and Jordan 1 and put it in the Disney vault. And that doesn't mean like they're going to just go away completely, but it means there's not going to be like wave after wave of GRs of them. And maybe that means lower stock numbers. And all that means is less business. So maybe numbers wise, the business might still go down. But in terms of hype and building, all that kind of stuff, it looks like 2025 is this kitchen sink year with hype building, especially when it comes to the sneakerhead part of this. It's all the grails are coming back. It's Frank Cook is coming back. And, they know the formula. They borrowed it from Nigo, as I talked about, and they perfected it. And so this kitchen sink year kind of buys them some time. And all those people, the Frank Cook, and that's what they're working on right now. They're working on 2026 and 2027. What's going to come out then? So they're getting ready and they have the right pieces in place. They still have some problems. They still got to figure out like Nike basketball and not have every silhouette look exactly the same. They still have to figure out how to properly market to women and kind of regain some of the other business they've lost in running and places like that. But all that, I'll leave that to like the actual Nike Wall Street analysts. But ultimately, it was on Mark Parker and Phil Knight and the entire board of governors for betting on DTC, and that bet failed, and now they got to regroup. But long term, Nike is not going to give up DTC. They simply make more money on product that they sell directly than they would through a retailer. So long term, DTC is still their future. They just have to pull it back, find the balance a bit. And that's what they're doing now. They're regrouping with all these retailers, with Foot Locker. But long term, Nike's not going to give up on DTC. They're simply always going to make more money on product that they sell directly than they would through a retailer. It's still an important part of their business. So long term, that's still going to be their goal. But short term, they're going to have to pull back a bit. They're going to have to regroup and reconnect with Foot Locker. And that's what they're doing now. And all the problems of the past few years, well, that was the previous regime's fault. That was John Donahoe's fault. Winning isn't for everyone. So that's the episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed the takes. There was a lot of takes in this episode, a lot of killer, no filler. There's lots of topics where I did have to think twice about should I even say it, especially when I'm speculating or when I'm talking about things that I think are wrong, but could be disrupting someone else's journey up a mountain. So whatever it is, this podcast will remain punk rock in spirit. And you know what they say in punk rock? Go get your bag, girl. No, they don't say that. They say, go fuck yourself.